many choices in internet radio, and the staff and host of LA Talk Live would like to thank you for choosing the internet's hottest destination for the most eclectic sound and invigorating talk. This is LA Talk Live. We are more than just talk.
There's no combination of words I could put on the back of a postcard. No song that I could sing, but I can try for your heart. And our dreams, and they are made out of real things, like a shoebox of photographs with sepia tone.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pathways to Love. I am your host, Julie Orlov, and I am delighted to spend another Sunday afternoon with all of you today. We come here every week to talk about relationships and how you can build very strong and intimate and powerful relationships in every area of your life. And I have been doing this work for over 25 years as a psychotherapist, an executive coach, a speaker, and the author of the Pathway to Love books and programs. And today we're taking a little bit of a shift from the topics that we've been speaking about lately. Usually we focus a lot on romantic love relationships, but today I wanted to talk a little bit more about your relationships at work, because let's face it, most people spend the majority of their waking hours at work and with the people they work with, not necessarily their spouse or their children or their loved ones. It's amazing how much time we actually spend with people at work. And those relationships are just as important. They provide valuable insights and resources and lots of gifts for us. So I don't want us to dismiss the importance of our workplace relationships. And today, I am so happy to have my friend and colleague with us today, the wonderful Hugh Leonard. Thank you, Hugh, for being here.
Thank you, Julie.
And Hugh is, you get an applause around here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you didn't think that was going to happen,
Terrific.
did you? Hugh is a workplace ethics and human development expert, and I know that's a mouthful, and we're going to talk about that. He also is the author of this wonderful book called Interiority Powered: How to Use Your Inner Energies at Work. So we're also going to talk a lot about what's in this, because I've read a synopsis. I haven't had time to go through the whole book, though. I am looking for, look at the look of disapproval already. You're like, why haven't you had time to do that? But I am going to do it, but I have enough information, and I've read little snippets here and there. So it's really it's an incredible piece of work that you've put together, and it's a valuable source of information for people really in the workplace, whether you're a CEO, a business owner, a manager, or a frontline employee. I mean, this is valuable stuff.
I believe so.
Yes. So I know your background, but you have such an interesting background, and you've done so many incredible things with your life. I wanted to know if you would share some of that with our audience today. So how did you get to come here, be here in this moment in time?
Well, historically, I was born and brought up in Ireland, came here to the United States when I was 18. And then after 6 years of studying in a Catholic seminary to become a priest, I became a priest and moved to Japan. I was sent to Japan as a missionary and spent the next 17 years in Japan, working with Japanese in churches. I had 5 churches at one time. And then I decided to leave the priesthood when I was 45 years old. I decided I'd better leave at that time or forget it.
Or forget it. That was it? That was your opportunity?
That was my opportunity.
Okay.
I was tired and needed to change. And
Okay.
so I left the priesthood and came to California. And there was a lot of Japanese companies in the Southland at that time. And I became a consultant, trainer, and coach for Japanese companies here and around the world. And I've been in California, Los Angeles since. And I came to this country to do good, and I did well.
You know, what is the biggest difference that you learned between the Japanese culture and the American culture? Like, what is important about understanding what each brings?
Well, the American culture fosters individuality, and the Japanese culture fosters the collective or the group orientation. So that there's a lot more sensitivity in a Japanese meeting, for example, to how the others think or what they think. And all of what they suggest is taken into consideration in consensus decision making. Whereas in this culture, a lot of it is pretty much depends on who has the power to
Right.
make the decision.
Right. Or who's the loudest.
Or who's the loudest, or carries
Right.
carries the biggest stick.
That's exactly right. You know, it's interesting because when I wrote The Pathway to Love, it's a developmental process that relationships go through from beginning to creating very transformational relationships. And one of the premises in the book talks about creating, needing to understand yourself first, kind of creating a strong, complete I.
Right.
And then, though the real transformation, the most powerful form of transformation, according to my theory, my concept is that you get to a point where the needs of the relationship come first and foremost above the individual needs. And it's by approaching relationships from that perspective that takes on transformation at a different level. Though I want to point out that part of what I say in that, though, is that if you don't do the work of the I first, if you jump into its collective solely at the expense of the individual, you can get into problems. And I'm wondering, in your experience working with companies in Japan and in the United States, kind of what's your take on that? What do you think about individuality versus a collective?
Well, from my angle, I think that before an individual gets to really identify themselves as an I or an individual, I think they have to engage with themselves inside. And I call that kind of the soul talk. You have to talk, as it were, to your soul and engage with what the soul requires of you. And the soul is, of course, without limit. It's infinitely large. And it knows where we're supposed to be going, or it gives us our call in life to do or to be something. And when we engage with that, when we talk or listen to our soul, then we begin to have a clear idea of what we are supposed to be about. Not what we're supposed to do initially, but what we are about and how we respond to the challenge of our life.
So, in other words, the soul kind of whispers your purpose.
The soul tells us, but we need to have a real sensitive ear or a listening to our soul. And that it doesn't mean that the soul talks to us in words, but the soul talks to us in images or in our imagination, in our dreams, in our waking imagination, in what we are pulled toward inevitably in our lives. Sometimes we want to go that direction, and we find ourselves inevitably pulled in this direction. And we wake up and realize, there's something else going on there at a deep level. I am being pulled in that direction. And that's the language of the soul.
So to help the audience understand what that looks like, I can only imagine that entering the priesthood and leaving the priesthood are two pivotal moments in your life.
Yep.
And that you must have had an interesting dialogue with your soul about, I would imagine, both those decisions.
Yeah.
And what did that look like?
I think that the second one is probably the more important. Why did I change at 45? Well, I think probably over the 2 or 3 years prior to leaving, I was getting hints that I was not going to be a typical classical priest in a parish for the rest of my life. I was getting hints of that. I was becoming aware that what was represented in the vestments or the ceremonies, the mass, etc., was not me, or was not going to be me in the after period of my life after 45. Because I had a sense that I became a priest when I was 25, and I decided I'm going to give this at least 20 years. And before the 20 years was up, I was getting hints from my inner side that it's time.
Well, it's interesting. Just the fact that you said, I think I'm going to give it 20 years
Mm-hmm.
tells me it was already speaking to you. Because it's like going into a marriage and saying, you know what, I think I'll give I went into my marriage in some way saying, okay, I'm going to see how this goes, which is different than saying this sense of this is my life with such clarity. I find that interesting.
Well, I suppose you're right in the sense that if I say I'm going to give it 20 years, I'm putting some kind of limitation on it.
Mm-hmm.
But it wasn't that I didn't really work hard at being in the priesthood for the rest of my life. I did work. I, did the praying. I did the priestly work. But there was something else going on. It's in Catholic terminology, it's called the Spirit or the Holy Spirit that is giving one hints or intuitions or inspirations or whatever you want to call it. It's like a voice that is not in words, but it's a hint, strong hint.
Okay. So, and how do people I think most people know, they recognize when that kind of voice is speaking to them.
Yeah.
I know that I've had experiences where I've been presented with a choice or a decision, and I know that if I'm not settled, it's not the time to make the decision. So,
right.
so I'll give an example. I don't know why this one popped up, but I remember when my children were younger, and I had been recently divorced, and they were still pretty young, and my ex-husband wanted to take them on a cruise for a week to Mexico, and they were. My younger one was really young. I mean, she was talking like 3 or 4, and she had never been away from me that long, and I knew I was anxious. So I thought, all right, if I make the decision purely based off my mother's separation anxiety, that was already like flourishing at the moment, that might not be the best decision. It may not be what's the right decision. So I had to get myself calm and settled so that my emotions and the anxiety weren't getting in the way. And I could just sit with, what does it feel like in my gut? Kind of how do I feel when I see her going on the cruise? And when I don't, kind of how did that work for me and what decision felt comfortable for me?
I think that's a very interesting experience that you described there, that getting yourself calm emotionally and then settling down to make the best possible decision based also on what is your gut or your intuition, your stomach, or as the Japanese say, your hara. Which is the belly. What is it saying to you? And I think that's what I'm hinting at in the book that I've written, and it's about how to be a whole person at work, which means physical, mental, emotional, psychological, spiritual, the whole 9 yards.
Right.
How to be that person at work, and it requires that we tune into our emotions, but that we also tune into everything else that we are and bring all of that to our work so that we are pretty powerful. Most people are physically present perhaps at work, but maybe not engaged, as they say anymore.
Right.
Or maybe only 20% engaged with the work that they're doing. But settling down and becoming a whole person, a mature person, or someone who's on the way, on a journey toward their best self, and being able to be that at work is a pretty powerful way to be in life.
I totally agree, and I wonder how many people feel like their manager, their supervisor, their company supports that. I imagine there's a lot of people who say, if I try and be fully who I am, I'm going to get a lot of pushback on that. What has been your experience with that when it comes to?
Well, my experience is that supervisors, managers, and even the upper levels of management, they do not expect workers to be anything more than, let's say, they people who put together the task, whatever they're assigned to do, they push it out. And they don't expect the workers to have really deep opinions or perspectives on life, on the work itself, on the value of the work they're doing, on how they're getting meaning or not from this job that they're getting. They don't expect that enough. And therefore, they get less than the full person at work. So it's the expectation of the manager, the supervisor, that actually limits the presence of the person at work, that limits them in their being fully present and doing very creative and productive work. And that's a difficult thing for top-level managers to manage.
Well, yeah, because they don't have the sense, I put this in quotes, a sense of having the control that they want. I mean, it's easier to control 20% of a human being than someone who's fully in their power. On the other hand, I think it also takes a very developed and emotionally mature and pretty confident, secure manager or executive to not be threatened by that. Because I think, when I talk to people in the workplace, because we both
Sure.
cross these same circles,
Right.
one of the things that they complain a lot about is how easily people get threatened. So people, they'll take credit for somebody else's work.
Right.
People will backstab.
Right.
People will fire if they hire someone
Right.
and they're a little too sharp.
Right.
They feel very threatened. They'll find a way to get rid of them. I mean,
Right.
there's all kinds of
Dynamics.
dynamic. You know what? That's such a nice word. Dynamics.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's a lot of interpersonal dynamics.
Right.
And as you mentioned there, you used the word control. And a lot of supervisors learn to control the subordinates or the co-workers. They learn to control them in many, many ways by threatening them or by withholding
Right.
information or by shifting them to a job which is somewhat less than the one that they have now. And that's a punishment for them not being cooperative. So all of that dynamic goes on in the workplace, but that's not the ideal. What we are looking for is, mature, highly self-possessed supervisors and managers who are not threatened,
Right.
who are actually appreciative of people who are whole and mature at work, who give mature, well thought out reflections on the decision that's about to be made. They think about it from the whole angles, all the angles and dimensions and levels of decisions. And that's only for the good of the company, or should be.
Right. Well, okay, and where do we find all this? I'm thinking, it's funny. I have two examples.
Okay.
I have two examples in my own personal life. Now, most of my career, I've been self-employed, but there's been some opportunities where I have been employed. Now, this one was, we're probably talking 25 years ago.
Okay.
I was hired. It's actually an interesting story. I'll try and keep it condensed, even though I tend to get a little wordy. So,
All right. Go ahead.
I was hired to do crisis intervention for an inpatient hospital for adolescents. Okay, so, my first clue is that my position didn't fall under the clinical umbrella. It actually was in the marketing and business office.
Oh.
First clue. But anyway, so my job was that someone from an ER or a family that had a crisis with their teenager, they would call this hospital for a free assessment. Okay, and then my job was to either go to the ER, go to the family's home or somewhere, do an assessment to see what level of services would be helpful for this adolescent. Now, I was hired at a very low rate. I mean, it was almost minimum wage, and I was a master's level social worker at the time.
Sure.
But the deal was that for every assessment I would do, I would receive $50 in assessment.
Right.
So I'm thinking, okay, I can make a decent living,
Right. Right.
So that was my interview. I get onto the job, and I'm ready to get started with my assessment since I do need to pay rent, and I feel like they hired me because I'm qualified to do
Right.
this. Well, all of a sudden, the issue came out that you can't do assessments yet. Like, we need you to shadow somebody else and be with them while they do their assessment until we give you the green light to go off and start doing them on your own. And I thought, Okay, probably should have said this during the interview, but all right, I'm going to kind of go with this. I'm going to try and be flexible, but I said to them, this can't be without any definition.
Mm-hmm.
How many assessments do I need to go on before I can actually,
Okay.
because my ability to make a living is tied to it.
Sure, of course.
So this is not, if I was just getting paid a salary, you want to supervise me forever? That's fine.
Right.
But they had tied my ability to pay my bills to this.
Different story.
Very different story.
Mhm.
And so they came up with some number. And as we got closer to the number, I can't remember exactly what it was, but I clearly did something my manager did not like. And her way to punish or control me
Sure.
was to say, I think you need more supervision. I think you're
Right.
going to need more shadowing of assessments before we let you on your own. Now, needless to say, this work situation did not last very long.
Yes.
But that's I think such a extreme, I think rather the gross example of what people do in the workplace.
And I think that your experience is not a singular experience. It's multiplied over and over and over again in our workplaces because, and here's one of the reasons why it happens that way, is that a lot of assessments or performance appraisals, when people are appraised for their job, it's based on the external production. You produce so many widgets.
Right.
In a certain length of time. 1 hour, you have 100 widgets. Okay, we'll pay you so much. It's like piecework. That image extends over a lot more than just piecework.
Right.
But the image of measuring people by their external behaviors,
Right.
how they behave on the job, that's the core of the present day performance appraisals. But as we well know, people are more than their external behaviors or what can be seen or observed. There are combinations of inner energies. And the inner energies are obviously emotional energies and what energy they bring, their excitement about the job, their intensity about doing a good job, their, making themselves available, and so many more types of energies, psychological energies, intellectual. All of these are very often without measurement.
Yes,
you can't measure them.
They're definitely more intangible.
Yeah, and the bosses have to learn how to measure the intangibles, and it can be done, but the bosses usually have to be very sure of themselves as they associate with co-workers who are doing externally high performance, but also in every way they're performing at a very high level.
So are you suggesting, because, I'm realistic enough to know that businesses, if they don't make a profit, they're going to fold.
Yep.
So they do need to make a profit.
Right.
And if their profit depends on how many widgets come out so that they can get them on the shelves and they can sell them, that need doesn't go away.
Yeah,
So-
but I think that there's a great switch taking place in the our present workplaces. It used to be that the performance was measured according to the number of widgets, but today it's knowledge and knowledge management, and the creativity or the inventiveness or that's what is really important in today's workplace.
Right. Well, I think part of what you're saying, if we just go back to the person who's making the widgets, because just using an example, that if you only limit the value of your employee to how many widgets it gets out, that's the paradigm that you're stuck in. You stay
Right.
in that.
Right.
But if you say really appreciate the entire human being and all of its creativity and innovation, then that person who makes widgets may say, you know what? I have an idea, and this idea may actually allow you to make twice as many widgets in less time.
Sure.
And this is my idea.
Right.
So if I'm correct in what I'm hearing from you, that when you invite the whole person,
Yes.
if you create a new paradigm, you actually have the possibility of having greater results?
Well, what happens is that you enlarge the possibilities of the employee to be resourceful. And so let's face it, they have been given a task, but they figure out a way to do it much faster, with less expenditure of resources, everything, and they get it done with very high quality and to the utter satisfaction of you and everyone else in the company.
Right.
That's the new type of wholly mature, a whole person at work. That's the new paradigm that at least I think I'm aiming at in our present day workplaces.
So in your work with executives and managers, how have you dealt with the resistance that underneath is a lot of insecurity and a lot of fear and all that stuff? Kind of what has been your strategy
Well,
or approach?
For any resistance, it's all energy. And if it's anger, try to channel, as it were, the anger into a different mode rather than expressing itself in destructive behavior or yelling or any of those things. To channel the anger energy into some kind of creative way of, let's say, rewriting an article, or just taking time out and let oneself simmer down and to become, as it were, collected and wholly present on the job. And I found that if I reflect back to an executive who's upset or anxious or in any way emotionally distracted, taken away or drained, and they can't actually operate, it's reflecting to them what's going on within them so that they can get a hold of themselves. So let's say someone is really upset, and I reflect back, you're upset, aren't you, at such and such? And they said, damn right I am, you know. And then the conversation takes a deeper turn and there's more release of the anger into greater possibility in a different direction.
So that, and then how do you coach a manager or an executive on how to release some of that control going downward to the person who makes widgets? Like how it's very hard. I mean, we all know every organization has a culture, and then even within that cultures, there's probably different cultures, but culture is not easy to change. It's
very difficult.
It's very difficult to change. And part of what I love about your work, because you really take things on, and you just want to have a cultural, revolution, where the culture of business doesn't even look anywhere near what it looks like now. And I love that. And that's even what my work is about. My mission is about really having everybody know how to relate to each other in this really powerful way. And yet, then we still get down to the nitty gritty. And in the meantime, it's almost like you have to make one tiny shift at a time. Like have one manager have an aha moment and shift the way they think, or one employee has a moment where they say, you know what, maybe I do have something of value to bring to the table.
Yeah, I'd like to follow up on your question or your comment. I'd like to shift the focus from just doing something or behaving in an external way in the workplace to a different mode of operation, which means that people have a sense of themselves as present, and it's their presence that achieves a lot of what goes on in the workplace. Let's say I'm calm, or I'm concerned about, and to even use the word that you use a lot, the pathway to love. If I love someone, I take care of them, I respond to their needs, I'm with them. If I'm able to be that kind of person in the workplace, a lot more gets done. by the group.
I totally agree. I think people do not feel free to be fully expressed and fully themselves in the workplace. A lot of people don't even feel free to be fully expressed and fully who they are in their lives, in their relationships with the people outside of work. So I think it goes on in both areas. And I tend to agree. I mean, I think that's our ticket out, is for people to really feel connected to who they are, not ashamed of who they are, free to express who they are, and free to accept other people doing the same, and from a place of non-judgment and acceptance and love. So I'm with you on this one.
Okay, so we agree.
We agree on that. Now, I don't know if we agree on how easy it is going to be to get there, because my guess is we're both realistic when we come down to it, too. We both live in the real world.
Well, to answer that, I would say that my work is like yours. It's an ideal.
Right.
And I'm aiming at the ideal. And in the workshops...
Good for you, Hugh. We all need to aim for the ideal a little bit more.
We need to aim for the ideal and not give up just because reality is difficult or it's hard to achieve. We need to keep striving for that ideal and know that we're on the journey. And that sounds a little bit poetic, but it is important to realize that this life is not an achievement, it is a journey. And we're on it. And there's ups and downs and successes and failures and all the rest that goes along with that. And I think that what I try to do in the workshops that I conduct for this interiority at work is to have people write their story and write it in great detail. I give them a framework for writing a lot of questions that they can reflect on. And then they have an opportunity to write as much as they want or as little as they want. But they need to reflect on the experience the real experiences that they've had. Because real experiences are the key to who we are and who we are becoming. Unless we reflect back on the pivotal or the key moments in our lives, we won't know how we became who we are now. And it's really important to connect all the dots so that we see our lives as one stream of energy that has produced us now. And we need to settle into that and allow that person to be and to produce and create at this time, because that's part of everything else that's happening in, let's say, in the universe, because it's the universe that helped to create us and get us to this point. And we need to belong in that moment, in that place. And that's where we do our best work.
All right, so there's power in telling our own story. We've also had shows on that before, but I think you mean this in a slightly different way. I think what we're going to do is let's get ready to take a break, because I'm noticing it's time for a break.
Okay.
And when we come back from the break, let's delve a little bit more into what you do in the workshops and more about how you connect those dots, because I think that's really important. Okay, you're listening to Pathways of Love. This is Julie Orlov. We're going to take a short break, and then we'll be right back. We'll see you soon.
Nothing so blue as a heart in pain. Nothing so sad as a tear in vain.
cumulative diseases such as high blood pressure, diabetes, fibroid tumors, high cholesterol, genital herpes, or a plethora of other diseases that rob you of a quality life? If so, then visit the website of herbalist Tahuti Ma'atra at dhealthstore.com and open the door to natural healing at an affordable price. dhealthstore.com has over 1,800 products created by herbalist Tahuti Ma'atra, specifically designed to help you heal the natural and safe way. At dhealthstore.com, you'll find everything from herbal formulas and cleanses, such as Tahuti's famous full body detox, as well as herbal teas, extracts, natural body butters, lotions, creams, children's products, hair care products, and of course, sexual enhancement products for both men and women. So visit the website of Tahuti Ma'atra, dhealthstore.com, or call toll free at 1-888-823-9416. dhealthstore.com.
Certified quality. And that the girl them need and I cry for every day without apology. But the right way, that's my policy. Shonda Paul alongside Beyonce.
All right. Well, that's different music for my show. This is Julie Orlov. Welcome back. You are watching Pathways to Love. And I'm here with Hugh Leonard, and he is a workplace ethics and human development expert. He's also the author of Interiority Powered. We want to make sure we get that T right so people are getting this down. And we are really talking about how to be a whole person at work and how that helps you build great relationships, be very productive, be creative and innovative, and make a difference in the lives of the people that you touch, including your employers. So, okay, so we left the break talking a little bit about creating your story and telling your, well, actually not creating, you're capturing, you're sharing, you're writing your story.
Yes.
And when you have people do this exercise, I mean, how far do you go back? Is it something of really as far back as you remember? And
As far back as you remember, and as traumatic or as innocent or as culpable, whatever you remember that was, in your own judgment, it was a pivotal. It made you change in some
Right.
way, and you still connect to it.
Right.
You still connect to some of the feelings that were associated with that event, that behavior, whatever it was you had at a certain time. And then I asked people to come to the workshop, and there are 8 people who spend quite a bit of time intensely sharing what it is that they experienced.
okay.
So the reflection and the remembering of the experience and the learning from that experience. What did they learn from it? What did you learn from it that you took and integrated it into your life at present? Then they share that with, let's say, 7 other people in the workplace, in the workshop. And it's the sharing also that drives home the awareness of, this is really who I am, and I'm not getting away from that.
Right. I'm not holding back. I'm going to reveal it
I'm
and
going to
show it.
reveal it and show it and accept the inner world of oneself and express that self to the world and to the others. And when people feel free and easy about being who they are, and that's what I say in the workshops, everything is a practice. So we practice being as authentic and as true and as connected to the rest of the people and as caring as we can possibly be in that in the workshop. That's effective. That's what a good workplace should look like.
Well, that's what a good relationship should look like. I mean, that's, if anyone who's familiar with my work knows that that's, I mean, I say that over and over again. It's in the, it's being vulnerable. It's in the sharing of who you are, the parts of yourself that are hardest to share, and having someone really see you, hear you, understand you, and accept you while you share that part of yourself. Not only does that create healing, but that creates intimacy, it creates power, it creates love. I mean, it creates nothing but good things.
Yeah, and I think that the expression of this self is not necessarily in verbal ways. It may be all nonverbal. It may be in stillness and in quiet, but we share at a deep level in the quiet or in the being in the presence of each other. And it's that's a very powerful, what should we say, it's a way of anchoring both people into this moment so that they can be very productive in their work or whatever conversation or whatever decision or meeting that they are in, they can really be.
So here's the challenge, because even in your most personal, intimate relationships, it's hard to be vulnerable. It's hard to do this.
Yes.
And in the workplace, it's even harder because people they don't necessarily want that. How do you create a safe environment, or how do you help someone say, you know what, this is who I am. I need to be who I am, whether I'm at work or I'm at home or I'm at the grocery store. And if somebody comes back with some kind of message that says, stop being who you are.
Yeah.
I mean, it could be in all kinds of different forms.
Right.
What does a person do with that? How do you maintain that commitment to yourself?
Well, it's like when you recognize that someone has the potential to be a friend. Somehow they have the same, or they react to the same values that you do. They have the same. They're drawn to the same things that you are. And I think when we recognize a friend, it's the same way in the workplace. We recognize a compatriot, someone that we can work well with.
Right.
And that's not everyone, unfortunately. There are some people who are turned off by what we demonstrate in our behavior patterns, or our style. Whatever it is, it seems to turn them off, or they react to it negatively.
Right.
And that's part of life, and it's part of the energies that we get from coming close to who we are and being who we are in the workplace. There are some people who are not going to agree with us. There are some people who are neutral to us. And that's life.
Okay, so you're not suggesting that everybody open up to the same level to everyone else, because some people you can identify are just not safe to do that.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be in your best interest to share everything with that person.
That's right, because they would take advantage of you in a negative way, and perhaps if you show vulnerability, they will actually take advantage of you and abuse that trust that you invested in them.
And here's the thing, because although the pathway to love, in the book itself, it talks about intimate romantic relationships. But I tell people the same process occurs in every relationship. And I think that's important to remember. So for those who are familiar with the 4 phases, know that when you're in the workplace, that, you don't jump from just meeting a coworker or stepping into a new job and just flooding them with intimate information about who you are. That isn't, the timing is not right. It may not be the right person. It may not be the right environment. That you have to take your time to build those relationships.
That's right. And I think that it's an iterative process also, that you reveal a certain amount and they reveal a certain amount, and it's back and forth until you recognize that there's something more here than normal, and that we can take a risk with going the next step.
Right. And, it's interesting, because I think of myself in this, and I am probably more comfortable than most being who I am. And so it's kind of hard for me to hold who I am back to some extent. Like, I have the opposite problem, which I'm sure there's many other people out there that actually have that. So there's some people that are very reserved and they're cautious, and they're going to kind of show themselves in a very slow, methodical way until they feel like it's safe. And then there are other people that just jump in, and it's I think equally important, and part of the muscle that I continue to build is knowing, sometimes you need to step back for a moment. Sometimes you need to be quiet and still. Sometimes you need to, to kind of sort out the situation. And the interesting thing about that, though, is when I walk into a work environment, I have that part of me going on. And then I have the other part of me that says, well, if they can't handle who I am, we might as well find out now. as opposed to later, because, you know, they're either going to like me or they're not.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's I would say that's rather unusual that someone like you can say they either accept me or they don't. But for most people, I think that they have a difficulty revealing their authentic selves, their true feelings. There are more of that second type than there are not. Someone like you may be the exception.
Well, yeah, I always say it's tough being me in this world. So what can someone do? What is your suggestion? What are the things you offer in the book and your workshops that help people get in touch with who they are and find their voice or their way to express who they are in the workplace in a way that's safe for them, you know?
Yeah.
So it's not going to get them fired.
I think that talking about the work itself, for example, you and I are in the people business, basically, where we interact with people so that they can learn and grow and have skills that maybe they didn't have before. But other people are, maybe they create software and they put together, they're programmers or something like that. But I always say, if you do your work well, you attend to the needs of the work, it will actually teach you, so that if we attend to our work, we will be shaped by it, just as we shape the product that we develop and we offer to the customer, whoever that customer is. We also become shaped by, it's like, again, our experience in life. Our experience shapes us. We become a person, and we do so because of the work that we do. And then when we learn how to do good work and avoid not good work, then we become powerfully capable in doing this particular task that I'm faced with or have been given.
So it sounds like, in a way, you're talking about developing, that a relationship develops between you and your work.
Yeah.
And just as you affect your relationships with other people, and that relationship also affects and continues to shape who you are, the relationship with the work works the same way.
Yeah, there are patterns that are drawn out of you by the work, because we need to exercise a certain part of our brain or our ingenuity to do this work well. For example, you've written a book, just as I have. To be a writer means we have to have a discipline, like it or not.
Right.
We need some structure, and we
God
need
knows
to.
it's a discipline.
We need to attend to it. But if we learn, you said exercise the muscle. If we learn how to have that discipline and apply it in whatever we're writing or creating in the written word, then we are being shaped by it. Just as much as we shape the sentence or the paragraph, we are being shaped by the discipline that we expend, or the energy that we expend to create the work itself.
Right. Yeah, I think that's important, because I think people tend to be limiting in how they think their work serves them, like the gifts that are in their work. I mean, a lot of people, they go, they feel that maybe they did a good job on a project, or they, put in a solid day's work for their paycheck. But I'm not so sure that most people really appreciate those deeper gifts that their work can give us.
Yeah, I would say that most people don't, and they don't because they don't reflect sufficiently. You need to be a reflective kind of person to understand what actually is going on inside you. You need to become aware of it. You need to understand the impact on yourself, on your emotions, on your physical body. If you're tense, you need to become aware of that. So there's an inner or an inward, that's what the interiority comes from. That word that has to do with the whole world that's within us. And it comes from the 4th century. Actually, it's not a recent word. St. Augustine used it in the 4th century to designate the whole inner universe of the individual. But we need at work, we need to pay attention to what's going on within. And that's the reactions that we have. It's the physical tiredness or being energized capacity that we have. It's the difficulties. It's the co-worker that we don't get along with and the ones that we do get along with. It's all of those things that we need to be reflective about and learn from. And that's where we become wise eventually. We learn how to do the job, and the work teaches us, the co-workers teach us, we learn ourselves, and we become wise and mature in the ways of doing our work.
So can you give an example maybe from your own life, or I know that you have a lot of storytelling in the book as well, that kind of demonstrates that, how that works?
Well, I guess when I think I was 8 years old, and I was in the classroom with 30 other wild Irish boys. It was the boys' national school. And our teacher wasn't present that day. It was one of the big rooms in the school. But next door, there was a very thin wall between our classroom and the next door classroom. And the head teacher came in from that classroom and he told us to be quiet. And of course, we were quiet for about 2 minutes. And then the noise rose again, and he came back a second time, and he warned us, and he said, I'll get you next time.
Okay.
And so everyone was quiet for about 3 minutes.
Right.
And then it was back again. And the next time he came in, his eyes caught mine, and he said, come up to the front of this classroom. And he was going to make an example of me. And he said, tell me who was making that noise. And I said, sir, I can't tell you that. And he said, tell me or I'll slap you.
Wow.
And I said, I won't tell you, sir. So he said, hold out your hand. And he gave me 6 slaps with his cane, as hard as he could.
Wow.
And of course I was abused, but I knew I was abused. Anyway, the point of the story was that reaction stayed in me. And I didn't realize it until I was 21 or 22. And all of a sudden, I felt myself reacting to people who sounded like that guy, or who looked like him, or who walked like him.
You had a little post-traumatic stress disorder.
I had a post-traumatic stress disorder, but the thing was, I became aware.
Right.
And when I became aware, then he had no power over me.
Right.
And I was able to let it go. And I suppose I became healthier, a little more mature, a little wiser, a little more knowledgeable about myself, and more at ease and less reactive.
So what happens if you're in a work situation and you come across now that you have a high level awareness, but you do come around somebody who has that personality, has that way about them? How do you respond to them? What's your take? How do you manage those kinds of relationships?
Yeah, well, first of all, I need to notice a pattern. Just one reaction is not enough. But over a period of time of interacting with someone, you can see that maybe they avoid a topic, or they have a visceral reaction and it shows in their behavior or their face, or they resist responding to a question or something like that. So I notice a pattern. And then when they give the signal that it's okay to explore a little further, I say, did you notice or are you aware that something? And I talk about the pattern that I have observed, making no judgment about it. I'm just saying, here's what I see. Did you notice that? And if they say, yeah, I do notice that, I can see that in myself. And then I ask, so what do you think? What's going on there? And they may want to explore it. I don't push them if they don't want to explore, but if they do, I'll accompany them on a certain journey to explore whatever it is that's turning them off or repressing them. Right. Very often they're not able to reveal something that's very important to them. And so I give them the opportunity to talk about it. And once they can talk about it and bring it out there and take a look at it, they're in control then. They have a sense of themselves that they didn't have before.
Well, and that gives the power of choice. I always say that when you're unaware, you're walking around unconsciously, whatever that issue is, whatever that memory is, whatever that wounding is, kind of runs you without even knowing it.
That's right.
But once the awareness comes in, then you actually can choose how you respond. So you know what I mean? So if you come across in your,
Coaching.
in your coaching, somebody who has that same, no nonsense, punitive, shaming approach in how they handle people who don't, who they're not able to control.
Right.
You can, instead of having some automated, maybe you just shut down, maybe you say, I'm not going to coach him, this is not a good match, whatever it may be. At least now you have more choice in how you respond. You kind of recognize, aha, this is somebody that's familiar to me. I understand, what happened in the past, but now, I'm not an 8-year-old boy anymore.
Yeah. Well, I think as a coach, I have to have a certain permission from the client to begin that kind of investigation, let's say, or helping them to investigate what's going on with them. And that obviously has to have some repercussion in the workplace. It has to help them. Whatever they uncover about themselves has to release more energy than they had available for their work before.
Right.
So it has to have something that opens up energy for them, or creativity, so that they're more able to do the job that they're being hired to do.
Right.
And I think that if an individual gives me the permission to be that way, that kind of a coach for them, then I can do it. If they don't, and I may test the waters a couple of times, but if they don't give permission, I can't insert myself into their space.
Right, exactly. No, I everybody moves at their own pace, in their own timing. It's their own journey. And I think that needs to be honored. Yeah. If, we don't have that much time. So let me just ask you this. So this is what I'm hearing that I want people to really get, that taking the time and the space to be still and self-reflect and really work on who you are from the inside out, not from the outside in, but from the inside out. What that actually translates into is more energy than that's freed up to do work at it's the difference between working while you're lugging around, 1,000 pounds behind you, and then freeing up the 1,000 pounds. It's like, oh my God, now look what I can get done.
Sure.
And I think people need to understand, because some people, I know people say, I am so busy at work, who has time to reflect? And then I got home and I've got 3 kids and I've got to get dinner, I've got to run errands, I've got to help them with their homework, and then I got to get to bed. And I have no time for this self-reflection.
Yeah, but it strikes me that it's not the length of time, but the quality of the time, or the depth at which you reach in yourself. So that if you have a moment of real solid containment within, and that you are aware of yourself in this moment, and it can be a very fleeting moment, but it can open up a whole world of things. So it's not so much a long period of time within which we can settle down and reflect or meditate and go into a deeper state of consciousness. It's not that kind of thing. It's this intense, deep, momentary sense of I am here, and I belong at this time, in this place, with everything. I belong to everything that is around me, and that's nature and people, etc. And when you have a sense of belonging, that's really powerful.
Right. So when you get really present in the here and now, and part of while you were talking this, I was thinking, really your inner voice, your intuition, your spirit, whatever you want to call that, is accessible and it actually may be speaking to us all the time. So it's a matter of, it may be just not a matter of having to find it. It's just a matter of quieting down the other noise so that you can hear it or feel it or however you experience it.
The important thing is not to seek out distraction, because we go from one thing to another thing to another thing. That kind of takes away our attention from ourselves. Right. And we're constantly distracted.
Oh, and now they push it more and more and more.
Yep.
They don't want to. I mean, now when I do trainings, people, have breaks. Nobody just even sits. Nobody talks. Everybody's on their iPhone. I mean, we don't have any free time. But I think that is so important that you get comfortable with space. Just being.
With silence.
Yes.
With stillness.
Yes.
Just being there.
Absolutely.
Sitting.
Yeah. No, it's very important, and everyone out there, I think, needs so much more of it. So, first of all, I want to thank you for being here, Hugh. You are a delight to have conversations with at all times. And I really want to encourage people to get and explore the interiority powered, how to use your inner energies at work. And so how can people find the book? How can they find you? How can they learn about your workshops?
Well, if they go on the internet or to Amazon.com, they can find the book. Okay. It's available on the internet. And they can find my contact information. They can call me. They can email me. I have a blog. If they go on my website.
Which is?
www.interioritypowered.com.
Okay.
That's a mouthful, but it's interioritypowered.com. And they go to the blog. They'll get my bi-weekly blogs.
Okay.
And
very
that's
nice.
how I want people to connect with me, so we form a community around this whole topic of interiority at work.
Okay, beautiful. And if you need any other information, you can always get it on my website, julieorlov.com, or thepathwaytolove.com. If you click on the radio show banner, it takes you to the radio show information in the blog, and you'll see, just find this date, and you can also get all the contact information and everything you need to know about Hugh Leonard and his work.
And I want to thank you for this opportunity. It was wonderful.
Well,
you're a great interviewer.
Well, thank you so much. And you've been a delight. Okay, thank you everyone for being with us today. We look forward to seeing you next week. I'm Julie Orlov. This is Pathways to Love. Have a great one, everyone.
For you to walk down the boulevard and to take me. But the moment you appear, you wake me out of the slumber.